Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me again this evening. Just getting myself comfortable because, as always, I've just had to run up the stairs, which is why I'm out of breath. Tonight, I'm going to be looking at critical thinking. Okay. Oh, what am I doing? There we go. Sounds go off all the time. You think I'd be better prepared. Anyway, yeah, we'll be talking about critical thinking this evening. The importance of critical thinking, how it can be helpful. It can help with different things. It can help with our decision making. It can help with rumination. Pardon me. It can help with our mental health. It can help us evaluate our thinking, our beliefs, and so on. I'm going to be looking at really where it comes from, looking at a little bit of Greek philosophy, which is going to get a little bit deep, but I'm not going to get too deep with it. There's people out there know a lot more about it than me. I'll be thinking more about it from like a counseling perspective. Critical thinking is one of those things that in counseling and therapy, you're working with your therapist, it's looking at some of our deeply held beliefs and so on, the evidence for, the evidence against, the things that could be holding us back, the things that could help us move forward. I'm also going to be looking at some of the questions that were asked when I put the post up. It's one of the questions looking at, is change real? Is it fake? And so on. How do you get back to your rational self? Someone had asked about health OCD. What I will say about the OCD is critical thinking can help in the sense that we can evaluate some of those beliefs, those obsessions, the evidence for, the evidence against. The difficulty with something like OCD is the intense anxiety that comes up around the obsessions, the compulsions, and so on. In therapy, it's maybe best to deal with it in therapy because you're not just looking at the rational side, the cognitive side, the thinking side, again, looking at the beliefs for the evidence for and against, but also learning to manage the uncomfortable feelings that come with that, the anxiety, learning to regulate that, and so on. And the thing about change, someone had asked about, is the change real? Is it fake? And so on. Well, we constantly change. Everybody changes. Change is constant. Sometimes change is something we have to keep up with. We have to adapt. We have to adjust. Other times, change is something maybe we initiate. We have to maintain it. We have to sustain it. And critical thinking can help us to figure out what are the things that are maybe holding us back. How do we let go of them? How do we change them? Again, examine some of those thinking habits. For instance, we catastrophize, we jump to conclusions, look at some of the beliefs, examine those. Things like, nothing ever works out for me, so that's generalizing. And exploring things like exceptions. So, critical thinking, as I say, can help with things like personal development, decision making. It can also, let me start again. It's the ability to analyze, evaluate information that we have, even the situations that we're in. I talked in previous live streams about things like reframing and so on, grounding ourselves, being able to evaluate the situation. So there are elements of critical thinking in those things if you want to go back and watch those to get an idea. It's looking at our arguments for and against things, even other people's. Critical thinking involves us being open to new information. Other people may have information that we don't. They may know something we haven't. They may have a perspective we hadn't considered. So it opens us to the possibility of change. And then again, there comes things like our personal development and our growth. It's looking at things like logical reasoning, not just emotional reasoning. Sometimes we can say things like the feeling can be so intense. We're saying it's true because I feel it, or it's true because I think it. This helps us to think a bit more logically, to pick things apart, as I say, explore evidence for and against. It also requires, I think, a healthy level of skepticism, okay? We don't always have to take everything at face value. It's okay to ask questions. Can't remember who it was that said it, but it's a quote I read recently where someone said it's better to have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. I thought that was quite clever. So a healthy level of skepticism. So tonight I'm going to go through the concepts of critical thinking. I'm going to look at really where it comes from, again, the epistemology it's known as, and then you might want to have a pen or something with you, because I'm going to start asking you some questions, things that you can apply, practical things to help with your critical thinking skills, to help develop them. So first of all, the importance is, it helps with decision making. It helps you to weigh up various options, look at the pros, look at the cons, again, evidence for, evidence against, looking at the consequences for the yes and the consequences for the no, and be able to make more effective decisions. It also helps with problem solving. Not just recognizing you have a problem, but being able to recognize what the actual problem is and what is it makes it a problem. Define the actual problem. Analyze, pay attention, notice even the root causes of whatever the problem is. Because a lot of the time it can feel as if we're firefighting. We're always trying to sort something out, which could be the consequences of something else. When we look at what the root cause is and we address that, sometimes the problems may stop. It can help us with our analytical skills as well, to be able to analyze issues, interactions, difficulties, break them down into even just small little manageable chunks. Again, it's like goal setting. We might have a huge, massive goal and it seems so out of our reach, but whenever we break it down into smaller steps, that goal seems easier to reach. Sometimes our problems can be the same. It's not necessarily going to be the push of a button, flick of a switch or something. It may be a series of things we have to do in order to resolve the issue. Critical thinking can also help us be a bit more creative. You know, that old cliched phrase, I think it was from the 90s, thinking outside of the box. It can be hard to think outside of a box if you don't know you're in a box in the first place. Critical thinking helps us to be a bit more creative, to explore alternative perspectives, alternative ideas, and even generate innovative ideas to help us do or get what it is we need to do or get. It can also help us with our communication. It can help us to articulate our own thoughts a lot more clearly. Some people find it helpful, for instance, to write things down, they journal things. I think that's quite a good idea. It's something I used to do. I do it occasionally. Maybe it's something I need to get back into. When we see something written down in paper, we read it back to us. Sometimes it loses its intensity. It doesn't have the grip that it had on us. So it can be easier to work through. It can be easier for us to figure out, again, why it is a problem in the first place. And this is where I'm going to start getting a bit deep, so please bear with me. Epistemology, it's a branch of philosophy that it's concerned with things like the nature, the scope, and the justification of knowledge. What is it we know? How do we know it? What is it we believe? Why do we believe it? What is it we think? And why do we think it? It seeks to understand how we come to know the things that we claim to know. Someone could have told us. We could have learned it in school. Whatever it was, we could have read it in the book. It's recognizing that sometimes we can misinterpret things, or the people that tell us things could be mistaken, could be in error. So the key concepts behind critical thinking that often lie in epistemology would be, first of all, what is it constitutes knowledge? Okay, it's not just information. For something to be considered to be knowledge, it would need to be believed, true, and justified. There has to be some kind of evidence behind it. So again, it's looking at truth as well, exploring the nature of truth. How can we determine what truth is? What lies behind a belief being either fact or feeling? What is it makes it? Sometimes it can be a bit of both. Investigating the nature of beliefs. Again, where's the evidence? How beliefs are formed, how they're justified, how they're revised over time. Because again, new information comes in. Sometimes that new information comes in, and what we do is it's like we adjust that framework. We can see things a bit differently. Sometimes new information comes in, and it's like we reject it because it goes against what we already believe. So it's really investigating the nature of beliefs. Beliefs can come from the people around us, can come from society, can come from rules and regulations and so on. It's not that they're good or bad. It's just recognizing there's a reason behind them, where they come from, why we believe what we believe, and again, are they fact or feeling? And justifying the reasons that support a belief, because sometimes we could have genuine reasons. We believe if we put our hand in the fire, it's going to get burned. That is a belief, but it's also fact. And we know because every time we put our hand in the fire, it's going to get burned. Other times, we could believe something else, and there may be exceptions. So it's not true in every single situation. So something could be a little bit more nuanced. Also, examining the different criteria, if you will, for determining when a belief is justified. As I say, something could be true, but not necessarily true in every situation. There could be exceptions. Okay, and moving on. As said earlier on, what we need is a healthy level of skepticism. Skepticism doesn't mean we necessarily disbelieve everything. It means we're open to questioning things. Again, why is it so? Could there be alternatives? Asking questions that can challenge our confidence in certain things. Is there any evidence that could lead you to think otherwise? Is there something that could maybe change your mind if it was there? Remember, beliefs being either facts or feeling. Looking also at the reliability of some of the sources of the information we get that could lead to our beliefs. Sometimes it could be cultural, sometimes it could be our heritage or whatever. Generations of my family did this. They all believed this. We all have to go into the same line of work, or we all have to live in the same area. What is it lies behind that? I mean, it could be cultural, could be, heritage, things like that. There could be the testimony of other people. We believe something because someone told us that they had an experience, and it could well be true. But it might not necessarily be true for us or for other people and other situations. It is still worth bearing in mind, though. Recognizing as well that sometimes you have any of these arguments online in particular, someone might say something to you like, this is true. Well, why is it true? Because all of these people think it. Well, a mass of opinions all about the same thing. There may be something in that, but that's still not necessarily evidence, because a lot of people could be wrong. Every bit as much as we could be wrong. Other people's opinions can often be based on their experiences and their perceptions, and there could well be something in it. But again, not necessarily in every single case. So that's just a brief outline of the epistemology, looking at how we question some of these things, what lies behind our beliefs, our thinking habits, and so on. And how can it help? Well, when we think a bit more critically, what it can do is it can help reduce our anxiety. A lot of the time we can feel stuck. We could have a belief, for instance, that if I do something, something terrible will happen, or something worse will happen. It won't get any better, it'll actually get worse. Being able to think critically and evaluate the situation. An example would be, if anybody remembers, if anybody watched it at the time, I did a live stream talking about the ABC model, CBT-based concept. The A being an activating event, something happens. The B being our belief. What do you believe happened? What do you believe about yourself? What is going to happen? And the C being the consequence. And when you get an idea of that concept, and you get an idea of some of the narratives that you create around that, you can think a little bit more critically. Again, how do I know this is going to happen? Where's my evidence for it? How do I know that person meant that? So, or why am I saying it that way? Opening ourselves up to, if you will, a reasonable alternative. So it can help reduce our anxiety when we're open to different possibilities and we're able to think about something from perhaps many different directions. It can also help with our overthinking, because again, a lot of the time what we might be doing is ruminating. We may be catastrophizing. We may be assuming the worst. Whenever we look at what the situation actually is, how much of it is real? How much of it is fact? How much of it do I actually know? And how much of it could be my rumination, could be my imagination, could be, past experiences that I believe are playing a part here. This will happen again. It happened before. It can also help with our problem solving, as I said earlier. And with our problem solving, what we can do is we can ask more specific questions. Whatever the issue is, again, it was a previous live stream. You look at some maybe solution finding questions. It's not always what's the quickest way out of it. Depending on what we're going through, it could be what is the best way through it. Whatever we're struggling with, we could be asking, can I change it? There are some things we cannot change. We cannot change other people. We cannot change the past. But we can be asking, what can I change? What is within my power to change? I could change my approach. I could change direction. I could change how I choose to respond or whether or not I respond. The second question in that sequence would be, can I accept it? Whatever it is we're struggling with, can I accept it? And that can be a difficult thing for a lot of people, because something can really, really hurt. It could be really unfair. It could be catastrophic. But again, engaging on our critical thinking, we recognize that when we accept something, we're not okay with it. We're not approving of it. We're not fine with it. Sometimes we're just acknowledging that it is what it is. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we're helpful. We're helpless, rather, because that can take us back to the first question. What is it I can change? What is it I could do differently? The third question to help with the critical thinking and to find solutions is, can I just let it go? Can I leave it alone? And that doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean it wasn't real. It doesn't mean it doesn't have the impact that it did. Sometimes, again, thinking a bit more critically, you ask a question like that, what you may be saying to yourself as you're asking it is, I'm not going to allow this to consume any more of me. This has taken up too much of my energy, too much of my time. This has taken too much and given nothing back. When we decide to let something go, again, it doesn't mean we don't care. It just means we recognize that whatever it is has been hurting us too much. So critical thinking can help us with our problem solving skills. It can help us fine tune a lot of the skills we already have. I had a glass of water and I didn't bring it up this time either. I keep pouring out glasses of water to bring up because I know I'm going to need a sip, and I just leave it sitting in the kitchen. But you don't want to hear me whining on, you don't want to hear me moaning. But anyway, I just thought I'd get that rant out there. I need to work on my problem solving skills. How do you get a glass of water up the stairs? There's an effort. There's tonight's challenge. How do I get a glass of water up the stairs? Helping with our problem solving skills, developing the ones we already have, fine tuning them, being able to adapt them to different situations, because a lot of the things we do might not work in every situation. So we learn to be a bit more creative. We can learn to be a bit more adaptable. With our decision making and our problem solving, critical thinking can also help us to explore both the short and the long-term consequences. If we're only thinking of what's the easiest route out of this, well, there's an expression I use quite a lot. The path of least resistance rarely takes you where you want it to. Sometimes it leads to longer-term misery and hardship. It's not always the quickest way out. It could be what's the best way out. So critical thinking can help us to explore both the short-term and the long-term consequences. Something that could be painful in the short term might lead to growth. It might be something you actually thank yourself for later on. Can, of course, be the other way around. And that's why you're going to be thinking about the consequences, both short and long term. but also being able to think about the consequences, whatever the decision is, just like I said earlier. The consequences if you do something, which could well be painful, but you also think of the consequences if you don't, because they could be painful as well. Critical thinking allows you, if you will, to choose your consequences. Even if they're difficult, even if they're painful, that could well be in the short term, but they could lead to a longer term better outcome. Critical thinking can also help with your self-awareness, in the sense that it kind of encourages a bit of introspection. It's not just necessarily the problem solving, which can be a part of it, but it's also paying attention to what this actually means to me, the things that are coming up for me. What am I reminded of? And the last time I was in this situation, what was it I did? Did it help? Did it work? Or did it make it worse? Or whatever. You're able to think a little bit more. You're able to think about the things that did work as well as the things that didn't work. And again, choose. And even if something didn't work, pay attention to why it didn't work. Critical thinking can help us with that, because it could have been just that situation. It could have been that environment. It could have been we were a bit too slow, or we jumped the gun, we were a bit too quick. It helps us to learn. As I say, helps us to build on our self-awareness. It helps us to reflect a little bit more. It can also help us to recognize the impact of our actions on other people. Sometimes we might have a good idea, something we really, really want to do. It might look good, it might feel good. It might actually cost other people something. So we can think. We can think around that. We can think again in the long term. It might not be something we want to do immediately, so it might be a little small step at a time. And that way, it's not necessarily going to affect others adversely. Helps us with our decision making, as I said a moment ago, but also in the sense that are the choices we're making, are the decisions that we're making, do they align with our values, with our integrity, our self-respect? Do they also align with the goals that we want? Is what I'm about to do, or what is it I'm not about to do, how's that going to affect my longer term goals? How's that going to affect the people around me? Again, does this align with my values and so on, my moral compass? And it can also help with our communication. More we're critically thinking, it can facilitate, I think, better conversations. We can think maybe objectively as well as we can think personally, and we can think passionately. Sometimes someone may have a problem, a difficulty, they come to us, and we can maybe, rather than just jump in, well, here's what I would do if I were you. We can be a little bit more compassionate. We can even look at things a little bit objectively, because what we would do might not be the thing that is in the best interest for them. It might actually blow up in their face. So again, we look at things a little bit more objectively. It can also, because our communication starts to improve, it can help reduce interpersonal conflict. When something contentious comes up, we can resolve something without something becoming personalized. You're always like this. You're that kind of person. You're always doing the other thing, to try to shut something down. No, again, we can be a little bit more objective. Someone's trying to do that with us. Again, we can be a little bit more objective. We can think about what it is they're trying to say. We could be asking them specific questions, which would be another whole kind of live stream on the different kinds of questions, to get to the bottom of what's going on with them and why they're trying to shut something down. So, if you got pen and paper ready, because I'm going to go through pretty much a step-by-step way of looking at developing critical thinking skills. So, first thing to think about is, first of all, I said a little while earlier, what is it you actually believe about something? But also, why do you believe it? What's behind the belief? Again, it could be a cultural thing, it could be personal experience, it could be any number of things. So what is it you believe, and why do you believe it? What is it you think, and why do you think it? I would maybe add another question to that. How are you thinking about it? Bear in mind, again, this is the therapist in me rather than the philosopher. I'm not a philosopher. We all have different thinking habits and styles. Again, we jump to conclusions, we catastrophize, we mind read, we make assumptions, a lot of different things. So it's not just what do you think and why do you think, it's also how are you thinking about it. You identify whatever an issue is, you identify what the actual problem is. It could be because it's difficult. It could be because it's maybe going to require some kind of sacrifice. It could be any number of things. You think about what the problem actually is and what is it makes it a problem. You could also be thinking about your own resourcefulness, because I think human beings, as a rule, we're more resourceful than we give ourselves credit for. Even look at alternatives to whatever the problem is. If you imagine if the problem was solved, what would you be doing differently? How is it holding you back? If you're afraid of doing what you need to do in order to solve the problem, again, you could be looking at alternatives. There could be many different alternatives. Give you an example. I have a friend, haven't seen her in years, so would you still call her a friend? I'd say I would. Haven't seen her in years, but she's one of those people that goes into businesses and she, looks at the problems, the difficulties, and she does a bit of troubleshooting. If you need to do this, here's what you need to do in order to do it. So, but I remember her telling me the first question she asks whenever she gives her presentation about what's going on in the organization and how they want to resolve it, how they want to change things. The first option she gives them is do nothing, which might sound like a bit of a weird thing to do or a weird option if you want to change something, but it is still actually an option. You have to explore what happens if you do nothing. If you don't do anything, chances are nothing's going to change. So when you recognize doing nothing's not necessarily going to make anything better, then maybe you rule that out. So you look at the various options, you look at the different alternatives, even propose solutions to yourself. Again, what would the outcome look like if something was resolved? And how do you get there from here? Weighing up the pros and cons as you go. You can, if you feel comfortable enough, if there's someone you trust, someone you feel comfortable with, have a discussion with them. Say it out loud. Sometimes when we say something out loud, it kind of loses its power, especially if it's a huge difficulty, a huge issue. I often say we've got a head like a TARDIS. It's always bigger on the inside. Once it's out there, we're discussing it with someone, sometimes we can come up with an actual solution because it tends to lose its energy. It tends to lose its power. And if we're having a conversation with someone, and again, maybe they're giving us a hard time, they're personalizing things. Again, going back to a live stream I was doing about Stoicism, we remain logical, we remain factual, we remain on topic. Doesn't matter how personal they're getting, we just keep talking about the same thing again, whatever the issue is. That's what we want resolved. We don't want to win points, we don't want to score points. So there is that element of being able to debate. Critical thinking can help us with that. We can also ask questions. We can ask ourselves as well as we can ask other people when we would like them to explain to us what they mean or justify whatever it is. We can ask ourselves questions about our own underlying assumptions. Things like, I'm helpless here. Well, again, we're a bit more empowered than we sometimes think we are. We can clarify some of those assumptions that maybe fuel some of those beliefs we have. I'm weak and helpless. Nothing ever works out for me. A lot of the time that's assumptions, because a lot of the time we're really just focusing on the times when things didn't work out for us, or we're maybe paying attention, far too much attention to maybe someone else's negative voice in our head telling us not to be doing that. It's not going to work out the way we would want it to, and so on. Again, what alternatives, what would you be open to accepting? Would you be open to accepting something working out for you successfully? Would you be open to the possibility of things actually going your way? Ask yourself different questions. Again, from many different directions. I couldn't list them all, but I hope you get what I'm talking about. Ask challenging questions. Why do you think this is true? If you do come up with an idea or a solution, you could be evaluating it, evaluate their feasibility. For instance, I could hire a SWAT team to go and do whatever. Okay, how feasible is that? How realistic is that? Yeah. Or, I could stand my ground and against these army of marauding whatever, again, how realistic is that? Evaluate your ideas. How feasible are they? And even what's the time scale as well? Because again, what we're often looking for is a quick fix. We're looking for something that's going to resolve something in the here and now. Thinking a bit more critically, what we're thinking about is, again, the long term. What is the actual outcome? And how we get to the outcome, the preferred future scenario, whatever you want to call it. We recognize that might take different steps. We might have to do little different things along the way in order to get that, in order to get there. So, pen and paper ready. I'm going to start going through some questions with you, and I hope they'll be helpful. I'll explain them as I go. As I said a moment ago, you identify your beliefs. What is it you actually believe? Why is it you believe it? Where's the evidence for? Where's the evidence against? You recognize and list your beliefs on various different subjects. Now, that could be anything. It could be religion, it could be politics, your ethics, your personal values, what you believe about yourself, what you believe about another person, another situation. Whatever your beliefs are, you actually list them, you identify them. It might require you to write them down. Again, you start to ask yourself the questions that challenge some of the assumptions that underlie those beliefs. Where did the beliefs come from? How long have you held them? How true are they? Are they true in every single situation? Could there be alternatives? Could there be exceptions? Are they based on evidence? Are they based on personal experience? Again, cultural influences. What are they actually based on? Which doesn't, by the way, make them good or bad or right or wrong. But what you're doing is you're building on your self-awareness as you're asking yourself these things. Try to seek different perspectives on maybe the same thing. Now, that might be listening to other people talk who believe something different, having a chat with them. It could be maybe reading articles or books that you wouldn't normally read that might oppose the things you believe in. Hanging out with people that maybe just have different opinions in general. Listen to their arguments. Don't necessarily dismiss them, but listen to them. Just in case there's a piece of information that you might actually learn something from. Be open to changing their mind as well. By the way, I think that's an important thing. So try to seek different opinions on maybe the same thing. It is good to have people who agree with us and validate us, but if that's all we have, sometimes we're in what's just known as an echo chamber. So we're just saying the same things to each other. They're bouncing all around the place. Nothing new is ever really learned. Just because we learn something new doesn't mean we have to accept it, by the way, because again, they might not have evidence for something, but at least we now have the information and we're open to that possibility. We can evaluate it, internally negotiate it, and either accept it or reject it. One way or another, we can still take it on board because we've learned something. If there is evidence for your beliefs, evaluate it. Is that evidence reliable? For instance, if someone was very mean to you, someone hurt you, you could be saying, well, everybody's like that. Well, you might know a lot of people, but I'm going to hazard a guess. You haven't met everybody. No, on the planet. There's no way. Not everybody's like that. They were like that. And there may be people like them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's like that. We don't necessarily have to treat everybody as if they're going to hurt us the way that person did. Yeah. So is your evidence is it reliable? Is it valid? And is it unbiased? The example of the person who hurt us, I wouldn't say that's necessarily, I wouldn't say that's unreliable. That is reliable because that person did behave in that way. But that's not evidence that everybody else will. You need to be open as well to discard some things that hold us back. That idea, I'll stick with the idea of someone hurting us. That means everybody will hurt us. Sometimes we need to discard that everybody will hurt us. What we can do is we can modify it, if you will. Some people could hurt us, but not everybody. And also, some people may try to hurt us. The belief could be that I am easily hurt. I'm not as resilient or as strong as I think. That could be true at a moment in a situation, but not all the time. Modifying our beliefs. I can get stronger. I can get better. I can learn how to manage different things in situations. I've also met people and will meet people who don't have any ill will against me. So we can either discard the things that are holding us back. Let me go a bit further about discarding things that hold us back. You see, when we let go of the things that hold us back, it's not that we actually lose anything. Sometimes it feels as if we do. We don't necessarily. I think the things that hold us back, once we let go of them, we address them, we understand them, and so on, the other parts of us, our creativity, our personality, our energy, all those different parts of us, I think they actually become stronger. They become a bit more consolidated. They become more galvanized. So we don't actually lose anything in the sense we don't actually become smaller. The other parts of us, I think, become a bit bigger. They become a bit more dominant. So that can be one of the benefits of critical thinking and being able to discard some of the things that we're holding back. Just like that inner critic that we sometimes have. It is good to have a healthy level of self-doubt. Without it, we're going to be reckless. We're going to be, doing stupid, silly, crazy things. So it is good to have a healthy level of self-doubt. But if we have an inner critic that's telling us that we're a worthless piece of crap and that nothing ever works out for us, that is going to hold us back. Whenever we address that, we let that part of us go, those other parts of us, as I say, they start to become more dominant. They start to become stronger. Another question to ask is about the consequences of whatever it is you do or whatever it is you don't do. You consider them. Reflect on the implications of your beliefs. If I do this, it won't work out well. Other things may not have worked out well for you. That's not necessarily evidence that this won't. This could be something different. And even if it were, what did you learn from the other times that didn't work? What can you rule out? It's like I said, that friend of mine who asks the question, do nothing. That's your first option, do nothing. But if you keep doing what you've always done, you're always going to get what you always got. I nearly said that. I hope you get the gist. Yeah, we can learn from past experiences. They don't necessarily dictate what's going to happen next. So we consider the implications of some of those beliefs. Some of those beliefs, by the way, serve us very well. Some of those beliefs could be, I need to be cautious, which is different from being hyper alert and hyper vigilant and anxious. No, I need to be cautious. I need to pay attention. So they could serve you quite well. If some of our beliefs are based on misconceptions, it's okay to let them go and it's okay to change them. It's okay to do whatever it is you need to do. If we continue to hold on to them, they could continue to hold us back. So it's perfectly okay to let them go. As I say, we let go of the things that don't help us, the other parts of us start to become stronger. Acknowledge that you don't have all of the answers to everything, and we don't always know the outcome from the beginning. If you will, what you're doing is you're practicing humility, recognizing other people have information you don't. Other people have experience or wisdom that you don't. We can listen to them, and again, based on the evidence and so on, as we start to think more and more about it, we start to, if you will, we're internally negotiating. We either accept it or reject it. We also recognize that if they are sharing something with us, we are learning from them, it can help us in a situation or in certain situations. It doesn't have to be true for everything. Sometimes we have to be a bit more creative. When someone is telling us something, sometimes we have to give them permission to be right. Sometimes we may be in error. There's no shame in being wrong. We're all wrong. I get things wrong all the time. Next one is engage in a little bit of self-reflection. Again, reflect on your beliefs, your values, thought processes, and things like that. It can help us. It keeps our mind sharp. It keeps us open to possibilities. It keeps us open to being able to navigate things differently. It can help with our resilience. Now, our resilience is the ability to navigate different kinds of problems, navigate through them, navigate around them. Paying attention to how some of our beliefs may have changed over time. There was a time we may have believed one thing, we now may believe something else. That's perfectly okay. Paying attention to how our beliefs can change over time. And some of those changes may lead to things like inconsistencies or contradictions. If we're aware of them, that's perfectly okay, because in the past we may have been wrong. We might not have had all of the information. Sometimes you'll meet people, and again, I'm aware of the people who watch my channel and the relationships and the situations they've been in. It's like if you were to say something 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, the people in your life that would have told you that you're being inconsistent, you're wrong, or you're lying because, 10 years ago you said this, as if it's still supposed to be true today, which is an absolute load of nonsense. I mean, how could it possibly be? We all change. We all change opinions, perspectives, fashions change, it doesn't matter. We change in many different ways. And sometimes those changes might bring up things like inconsistencies, which is why you often hear things like, well, that's not what you said 5 years ago. That's perfectly okay, because we've learned, we've adapted. Engage in that self-reflection. It is perfectly okay to keep on developing, to keep on learning. Next one is to try to promote little ways to think critically. Try to come up with little questions for yourself, even for other people. Now, you're not trying to be antagonistic, but you're trying to ask questions. It's really just about help me understand, even help me understand myself. What lies behind this? Why am I thinking this? Even how am I thinking it? Is this a thinking habit? Am I being objective? Ask questions that challenge yourself. If we don't challenge ourselves, again, sometimes we're just like in an echo chamber. Sometimes we feel as if we're stuck in our own kind of echo chamber, going over the same things again. So ask questions that can challenge things. Evaluate sources of information. My mate Dave down the pub says, well, I'm sure Dave's a lovely guy, but he's probably not an expert on, nuclear physics or something like that. So his opinions don't really count, if you know what I mean. Evaluate the sources of the information. Okay. And that can be helpful, as I say, when we keep on asking explorative questions. Doesn't do any harm to seek a bit of feedback as well. Just a little bit of feedback from others. People that you trust, people you feel comfortable with, work colleagues, mentors, friends, family, whoever it happens to be. People who can give a little bit of constructive criticism to you and challenge your beliefs, but do it in a respectful manner. And people who are open to you challenging them. A challenge, by the way, doesn't mean you're clearly wrong about this and here's why. A challenge could be something as simple as, help me understand why you think that. Help me understand why you believe that. Had you considered this? Had you thought of that? Or what about these exceptions here? How do they fit in with that? Just different little questions like that. And it's if you can, encourage other people to maybe ask you questions like that, because it does get us thinking. There's no harm in thinking. Thinking doesn't hurt. Thinking, I think, is a good thing. Thinking, I think, is a good thing. There's a sentence. The last thing I would say when it comes to critical thinking is to be patient. Okay? Not just be patient, but also be persistent. Again, that quote from earlier on, and I'm actually curious now. When I finish this, I'm going to find out who it was said it. Be patient and persistent, because sometimes it is better to have questions that can't be answered than to have answers that can't be questioned. Some people in your life will just say it's because I said so, or because I'm in charge, or because whatever. They're giving you answers that can't be questioned. Answers that can't be questioned are usually the ones that need to be questioned, I believe. So be patient, but be persistent. Be critical about yourself. Now, critical not in the sense that you're being judgmental, but critical in the sense that you're opening yourself up to possibility of further growth, further learning, to change in your mind if new evidence comes along or new ideas come along. Again, you're having a direction. It's perfectly okay to change direction if you see something else that either might get you closer, might get you something else that you would much rather prefer. It's perfectly okay. Critical thinking is an ongoing process. And it requires a willingness, I guess, to engage in that kind of examination at that level, not just of ourselves, but of other people, and allowing them to maybe examine our beliefs, values, and so on. So I hope you found those questions helpful. This has been, as always, it's been a whiz talk, like a whiz stop kind of session on critical thinking. There is much more I could go into. And maybe if you find it helpful, I will, at a future date, I will maybe look at more specific exercises. I'm just giving you an outline, what it is, how it can help, and some questions to ask yourself. But if you think it would help, I might go a bit further at some point in the future. Now, I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to have a look at the questions. I'm going to see if there's questions I can answer. I'm okay, you're okay. Pleased to hear it, Phil. GG is woo, I made the live. The hoodie's a good look. Do you know what this is? I was taking Freud out for his walk. Normally, I have to throw a shirt on. I at least want to look decent. But again, being late back with Freud, having to rush up the stairs. I would like to say, do you know what? I'm just going to lie through my teeth. I'm just back from the gym, everyone. Yeah, I was out, lifting weights and running the treadmill and stuff. That's why I'm looking casual. Noel says, OCD is a coping mechanism for trauma, trying to get a measure of control. Yeah, quite common it is. It's engaging in safety-seeking behaviors. You're right. And the obsessions is there's some kind of danger, some kind of awful thing is going to happen. The compulsion is, what do I do to try to get rid of that feeling? If I can't control this, what can I control? All of us, I think, have obsessive compulsive traits on some level. The disorder would be an actual clinical diagnosis. The disorder, the way I often think of a disorder is the impact it has on someone, their day-to-day functioning, their relationship with other people as well as themselves. It's the impact it has, the key word being disorder, okay? And it is a lot of the time, you're right, it is safety-seeking behavior. In therapy, part of the treatment may be looking at critical thinking, evidence for and against, things like that. But as I said earlier, sometimes, especially with the compulsive part, the feelings can be so strong. It's like it's like they can't function. It's their terror. If they don't do the certain thing, something terrible is going to happen. So in therapy, it's looking at them both together. It's not just looking at the rational, cognitive, logical side of the lack of evidence for the beliefs, but it's also learning to emotionally regulate what's going on as well, trying to find ways to de-escalate the anxiety. Emotions want to drive the car. Sometimes our thinking self has to take over the wheel. Yeah. Who was it said it? Alfred Adler, I believe. said that you should always follow your heart, but bring your brain with you. I think that's a great quote. Yeah, we have to bring our brain with us. Lady Campion says Lady Campion, I just want you to know I'm still enjoying your content. If anyone hasn't listened to her yet, she's got an amazing voice. You really need to listen to Lady Campion. Absolutely amazing voice. But she says, very useful topic. I actually made it here before the end of the stream for once. Well, it's nice to have you here. I hope you find something helpful. Action, belief, consequences, belief in influences and actions. Yeah, what I like about the ABC model is it does give us a space to recognize the narratives that we create around things. Something happens and we have a belief, and that belief, if you will, we create a narrative. It must mean this, it must mean this, and that's going to happen, and the other thing's going to happen, and it's, and then there's a consequence, and the consequence could be even just something as simple as spending a few days, being very, very anxious, withdrawing, losing our appetite, or it could lead us to do something in a certain way. And the thing about the ABC model is, what I like about it is, it's not a way of proving ourselves wrong, because sometimes we may be right. But the belief, again, we're creating a narrative and things become escalated. Things become so much bigger than they are. Sometimes even something innocuous can take on the magnitude of like a great white shark. It's coming right at us. The ABC model is really useful for identifying that. So if you will, if you're aware, if you're familiar with the ABC model, that's a way of engaging in critical thinking. You're opening yourself up to, because again, could well be true, but you're opening yourself up to possibilities that it might not be the way I'm seeing it, or it might not be as disastrous as I'm seeing it, or it might, you know what, could be the other way. It's not as brilliant as I think it is. It's just opening ourselves up to possibilities. Let me see. Critical thinking falls moot when I'm dealing with people I care about. Yeah, critical thinking. Some people might look at it as trying to detach the emotion from it, and that can be very difficult when there is a lot of emotion around something. Particularly, as I said earlier on, the example would be the OCD, for instance. That doesn't mean we can't do it. It might make it a little bit difficult. Again, we care about people. We don't want to hurt them. We don't want to offend them. We want to try to find the right way to do or say something that's maybe going to help them. Sometimes if we just take a step back and we think about it objectively, I think with critical thinking, if we think about things objectively, one way of doing that could be if you imagine someone you really care about is going through the same thing and they're trying to help someone and they're struggling, what advice would you give them? What do you think their options are? So it's just little ways to step out of yourself and try to look at things objectively. Just like that friend of mine who says, the first option is do nothing. If you start to think of all of the different options, you could do nothing. You could be harsh. You could be as blunt as a spade. You could be bitter. You could be compassionate. You could be whatever. You think of all the different options. You try to think about them all objectively. What could get you the best outcome? Let me see, where are we get to? How do we know what the truth is versus self-delusion? That's a very good question. T. Cancella, and I do hope I've pronounced your name right. I'll just call you T, if that's okay. That's a very good question. Truth versus self-delusion. Well, again, it goes back to looking at the evidence. What is the evidence for and what is the evidence against? And really, it depends on what the delusion is, and it depends on, again, the nature of the person. Some people might have the deluded belief they are, above everybody else. They are amazing. They are, everybody else should stop what you're doing and pay attention to me. I'm the most important person in the room. There could be something delusional there, but that's a self-delusion. Well, where's the evidence that you're important? You are important. Of course you are. You're no more important than the person next to you or the person across the room. Everybody is important. You might think you're unique and special. Of course you are. So is everybody else. You're looking at the evidence for and against. Now, again, this is the thing about critical thinking. Just like the solution finding questions that I was talking about, they might not give us the answers that we want. That's the truth, but sometimes could give us the answers that we need. Choosing our battles. Emotional detachment is hard when people are being so awful. It is hard. That's so if you think critically, it's hard when people are being awful. Well, yes, it is, because we're going to feel something that's going to bring up emotion in us. So we would think about, well, first of all, why is this feeling awful? What does this bring up in me? What is this reminded me of? When have I been through this before? What do I think would happen if I were to, be a bit more assertive? You start to think a bit more critically. You might start to feel awful. So you might start to think of, well, what's the best way to feel awful? Now, that could be you just don't hang around those people. It could be you be a bit more assertive. It could be you develop a bit of resilience. It could be, you learn to not just communicate, but even enforce your boundaries if you have to. That's critical thinking. It's not necessarily, this is painful, so I'm stuck. There could be truth in that, but we're not always stuck. Again, we let go of the parts of us that hold us back. When we do that, the other parts of us start to become stronger. I'm going to be very careful how I say this. We don't necessarily set out to hurt other people, but other people may take offense. And sometimes we have to give them permission to be offended. We haven't set out to hurt them. We just, when I say give them permission to be offended, what I mean by that is they might not like us saying no. They find that offensive. They find that hurtful. We don't like how that feels. Again, we develop resilience. We look at our boundaries, confidence, things like that. When we're thinking critically, it could be, how do we go about doing that? Okay. Adam asks, beg your pardon. I would like to ask a question, however, it's maybe hard to give an answer. Why people suddenly change and they feel comes being numbness? Adam, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. People change and they can feel a numbness. I can only speculate. I can only guess. Sometimes we may change because something we may have believed we found out wasn't true. And sometimes that can bring up different things. It can bring up hurt. It can bring up cognitive dissonance. It can bring up upset. Sometimes we just feel numb. We could feel disappointed that something we believed in we found out wasn't true. There could be many different reasons. I don't think there is one answer, and I'm not sure if that answers it, but it's the best I could do. Polly says, thank you. This is really interesting. Polly, glad you're getting something from it. Sarah says, you look great. Thank you. Again, just back from the gym, like the casual look. Oh, Lady Camping, that's really sweet of you. Thanks. Not a problem. Is there any way to accelerate the process of the narc getting bored and moving on? And also a Galaxy class and a Constitution class starship. Yes, I've got them both. I've got the Enterprise 1701, the original. I've also got the Enterprise 170D, the Galaxy class. Got them both. I also happen to have a Type 40 TARDIS, which is malfunctioning and stuck in the shape of an old London police box. I also have a Battlestar. It's known as the Galactica, the last of its kind. I have an Eagle transporter from Moonbase Alpha. And I have a Corellian freighter called the Millennium Falcon. But enough about my toys in the background. Going back to your original question, Sheevolution, is there a way to accelerate the process of the narc getting bored and moving on? It's never a one-size-fits-all. It depends on the person. Sometimes people go grey rock. They observe. They don't absorb. They don't feed the ego. They don't. They respond rather than react. And sometimes that can intensify someone's behavior. They do even more to try and get some kind of attention. Other times, if someone with very strong narcissistic traits, they're trying to impress you, you're just not interested. You don't give anything away. You're not interested. You're not asking them questions. You're even looking at your watch when they're talking. They might get bored very quickly and they'll go and find someone who is interested. It really comes down to the person. There's never really a one size fits all. When they get bored and move on, if you want to put it that way, that's what I think you'd commonly call the discard phase. You're no longer of any value. They're not getting what it is they want or what it is they need. They probably have a new person, a new target, a new environment, whatever it is that they think is going to feed their ego. If I could give you a list of 10 things to do, I would, but I can't, unfortunately. It really comes down to the individual. It comes down to whereabouts they are on that spectrum. It even comes down to the relationship sometimes. Pardon me. I recognize the name, by the way, Shevolution. You put content out and you share little clips of me in your videos. I think I'm kind of flattered. I didn't think I was that interesting that people would want to do that. So yeah, maybe I'm flattered by that. Okay. Ellie Wynn says, thank you. Excellent about critical thinking. Good. Hope you found hope you found it helpful. Look at you in your hoodie. Like different things. Well, if you like different things given by your name, you're seeing me in a hoodie. Do you know what? See, when I put the hood up, I can pretend I'm Emperor Palpatine. So be it, Jedi. I spend too much time on my own. Where do we get to? Jan says, fine critical skills are very much blocked by stress. When the mind focuses on survival versus optimizing the outcome, tunnel vision develops, trees block out the forest. That's a very good point. Critical thinking, but the more we practice it in situations and environments where we can maybe take a bit of time to think about things objectively, it's like anything else. When we practice these things, they are easier to use when we need them. It's like coping strategies. People would like coping strategies for something. The first thing I say is, if you rule out the things that don't work, sometimes you don't need a coping strategy because they're the things that could be holding you back. But if you are using coping strategies, you need to be able to practice them. I guess it depends on what it is, but you need to be able to practice them the times that things are okay, you're managing just fine. Because when you recognize how it works and why it works and what it can do for you, then when you're in that situation, you feel a bit more confident to use it. It's not like you're grasping a life ring or something from a sinking ship. You're just grasping it in desperation, hoping it's going to save you. You're familiar with it. You become a bit more confident. So you're right. In those situations, they can be blocked. But when you practice them, the times when you just practice it even in small ways. As I said earlier on, you write down your beliefs. It could be about anything, about why somebody is the best actor, or why this is the best TV show ever, or why you should vote for this person, or why that whatever it is the best. You write down your beliefs and you go through that process of examining the evidence for and against and so on, asking critical questions. Is there anything that could open you up to changing your mind, any new evidence that could be. When you start to do that, the more familiar you become in difficult situations, you feel a bit more confident to be able to, for instance, think a bit more critically. Let me see. Good point, Jen. Yeah. Figuring out where the balance is between overthinking and critical thinking is generally my problem. Overthinking something is when you're over-analyzing something. When we're over-analyzing something, again, we could be engaged in rumination over something from the past. It's like we're replaying it. We're trying to get a new piece of information. Or we could be thinking about something in the future. You know, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if they do this? What if he says that? What if she, whatever? Again, it's like a form of safety seeking, and we're trying to make sense of something. We're trying to cover all the bases. Critical thinking is different. What we're not doing is we're not necessarily going down a lot of rabbit holes chasing our imagination. Critical thinking is we're taking control of it. We're asking specific questions. We're thinking about the preferred outcome, not trying to avoid the worst one. If you think it would be helpful, if you are thinking about something, give yourself a time limit. Say to yourself, I will think about this for the next 5 minutes, next 2 minutes, whatever it is. Set your stopwatch, or on your phone or your watch or whatever. Give yourself a specific amount of time. Once that time is up, stop thinking about it. Just go back to doing whatever it is you were doing. Engage in whatever it is you were doing. It's just a way of trying to form a bit of discipline. It's not about not thinking about things, I often say. It's how we think about them, even when we think about them. So where we go, is this your man cave? Yes, this is my man cave and my office and my studio and the place I go where I even just want to have a nap. So yeah, this is my man cave. And so I never felt psychological pain before in my life until you last year. Okay. R.I.P. Pegasus. Thank you. You're welcome. I love your stuff. Thank you, Shevolution. I do appreciate that. Jen, what differentiates ADHD from trauma-induced overthinking and procrastination? I think the answer is maybe in your question, trauma-induced. Trauma-induced, again, people are engaged in a lot of safety-seeking behavior, danger avoidance. There's a hypervigilance. There is maybe a kind of intent behind it. It's trying to avoid difficulty. It's trying to stay safe. ADHD, there can be a bit of that. ADHD, I'm not trying to devalue anyone's experience. I can only speak from my own. I have one of those brains that jumps all over the place. I find it very hard to focus on something. Even if I'm researching a topic, I'll give you an example. If I'm researching a topic for a video, I might watch a video or I might read an article. I could maybe read case studies and something, but I can only do that for about 15 minutes. Then I close it down and I look at something else that I'm researching. I have to do it in different bits. I find it very, very hard. The only thing I can do it with actually is a book. If I'm reading a book, a really good book, a novel, that's the only time I can stick to it. I can read chapter after chapter, but other things, my mind goes all over the place. I find it very hard to function. If you watch my live streams are very different from my videos. The videos are kind of structured. I have a list of bullet points in front of me. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and I try not to stray because I know I will just go all over the place. When I'm doing a live stream, I do go all over the place, and that's how my brain works. So I'm not saying this to devalue someone with an actual diagnosis of ADHD, but I think it's very similar in the sense that they find it very hard to focus on one thing for a long period of time. Sometimes it's like splitting their conversation or their concentration from one thing to the next. So it seems like they're jumping all over the place. Sometimes it works for them in the sense that they can be very productive. They just do little bits of everything at a time. They think about different little things at a time. Trauma-induced is different in the sense that, as I say, it's more about safety seeking. It's more about avoiding danger, avoiding risk, and things like that. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I do hope it does. I would know a bit more about trauma than I would ADHD. I'm only really speculating when I'm talking about ADHD. Naps are rejuvenating. Well, they are for me. I'm 112 years old. Look at me. That's what naps do. NJ, great question. Let me see. We're coming. Live streams free flowing like this don't come across as being distracted. You come across as going with the flow. It's positive, I think. Thank you very much. And I'm actually just looking at the time. Again, I've run over. I'm supposed to finish at 9. I hope you found this evening to be helpful. As always, I hope there was something in it for you that you find helpful. Critical thinking is something we have to practice. I think it's something we have to develop, and it's something we continue with as well. We get again, it can help us with our personal development. It can help us with our own personal insight. It can help us interact with others as well. There's a lot of different things can come up with critical thinking. It can benefit us in many different ways. If we don't take what other people say at face value, we're not necessarily being rude. All we're doing is we're asking ourselves, as well as maybe asking them, help me understand the rationale behind that. More often than not, people can give you a good answer. They can, explain what it is and why it is, and all the rest of it. I think when you get people that stamp their feet, fold their arms, stick their lip out, tell you you're a horrible person, you should just do what you're told, maybe there's something there you don't want to be listening to. Okay. So, as always, thanks again for joining me. And the next one is going to be on a Wednesday. It's going to be in 10 days' time. Again, I said that this would be open. What I did ask was if anybody wanted me to cover anything, and if not, be interested in critical thinking. Tried to cover the questions that were asked in the little comment section. I hope I did that at the beginning. Again, I will put out, if I can think of a topic, I will. If not, I'm just going to leave it open, whatever topics you might like me to cover. And until then, have to forget before I forget, last time I was on, I was talking about podcasts. Well, my first podcast went out on Saturday. It is available on YouTube. I'm talking with Dr. Ruth Ann Harper, but it's also available on places like Spotify, and is it iTunes or the Apple one, whatever the Apple one's called. It's available on different things as well. So if you just want the audio, there's that. But other than that, it's on the channel. We're talking about with Dr. Harper, what we're talking about is difficult relationships, the impact of difficult relationships, navigating them, and even finding ways to thrive afterwards. She's very, very insightful and very, very nuanced. She has a lot of information. She also has, if you haven't seen it already, she has a really, really good channel, a lot of good information on it. And she's a really nice person. So if you haven't seen it or listened to it already, please go ahead and check out her channel as well. Tomorrow night video is going out, and it's different. It's a different kind of video. Normally, the questions I get asked are about, I get asked a wide range of things, but the majority of them are about narcissistic people and being in narcissistic relationships and the rationale or whatever behind certain behaviors. This video it's not strange. It's different in the sense that many of the videos I've put out, every now and again, I get questions coming up from people asking, but you're talking about, you're talking about this, you're talking about the victims. How do I stop being like this? I don't like being like this. How do you break the cycle? So the video I'm putting out tomorrow are some ways, just some ideas, and it's from a behavioral approach. Some ways to help reduce narcissism, to change narcissistic behavior. There's a lot of tips in that. So, well, hope you watch it anyway. Hope you find something interesting. And even though it's not aimed at the people that normally ask questions, I thought it would be nice, it would be useful to answer questions from people who may be struggling with narcissistic behaviors. The thing is, it's like I say, it's on a spectrum, and sometimes people do recognize their behaviors, their interactions is hurtful to other people, but it's also hurtful to themselves. They might want to change, but they struggle with how. What I talk about in the video is the very first port of call is you see a therapist. Everything else is just some tips, some behavioral ideas. But I do hope you find it interesting anyway. So, Shevolution says, I love useful idiots. That's a phrase I've heard recently. Yeah. I never liked the term flying monkey, but I can get why it was there. I prefer to call them enablers or agents or things like that. And then somebody used the phrase useful idiot recently, and it stopped me in the tracks. I thought it was really unkind, but in some cases, I think it's true. I started to laugh. Useful idiots. It's just Judy. I want to see Freud the dog. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do is normally he's actually up here sleeping with me, but tonight he's downstairs. So um the next time I do a live stream, I'll bring him up, and at the end of the live stream, I'll get him to jump up and say hello to everybody. So that's pretty much everything I've covered. Until next time, which is going to be 10 days, it'll be on a Wednesday. Until then, thanks for watching, and I do promise I will be dressed properly in an evening suit and all the rest of it. Until then, take care, everyone. Bye.